What's going on, everybody? It's FREEDO here for your Overwatch. The big patch on the PTR, buffing a handful of heroes that are struggling a little bit in the metagame right now, is going to change the game significantly, of course, alongside Doomfist being added to the game before long. Now, we already talked about Doomfist in a separate meta discussion video, but today we're going to add in these other changes that are going to be going into the game into that conversation, as well as update based upon the changes that went through to Doomfist on the PTR. We already covered this in news video, so I'll try to breeze past the context of what these changes actually are, but if you don't remember or you didn't see those videos, I will mention them as they come up. All in all, it seems that Blizzard also has been perceptive about the dive meta being incredibly strong, because every change seems to either improve a hero that's weak in that meta or allow them to be able to battle characters in the mobility meta. But what does this mean for the game overall? Does this mean that the mobility meta will just die, or will it just possibly be an option, or less of a bad option, to try to counter it directly? That's still yet to be seen, right? Even with Doomfist just being added to the game, doesn't matter how sick he is against dive, he still might not be enough for all we know. So the conversation is wide open at this point, but I want to try to evaluate the table as it's being set so we can think critically about what we're about to get when this next massive patch goes into the live game. Doomfist and all. Now, the belle of the ball of the anti-dive conversation, of course, is Doomfist. After us making the video discussing the Doomfist meta, a massive set of nerfs went to him, but does that change where we thought he was going to be played? Well, what was the change, first of all? Shorter distance on the rocket punch, as well as an unlisted nerf to the momentum after he does rocket punch, meaning that the super jump you used to be able to do to have insane mobility after rocket punching is honed in. Those might seem a bit reasonable, but the seismic slam one is the key. Back in our Doomfist meta discussion, we said that players that were really strong at being able to use seismic slam anywhere to just traverse the map with leaps and bounds. Forget leveling a skyscraper, he could leap skyscrapers with the old seismic slam. And on the PTR version right now, he only can use it to get to areas that are lower than him, which is a very big change. Granted, Jeff Goodman has already posted on the forums as well that they're working on the restrictions of that, so that in fact you'll be able to get to platforms that are equal to your height, meaning that a little bit of that crazy mobility will still be added to his kit. This is a more recent update that we didn't get to cover yet, but really it seems to put Doomfist into a happy medium between leaping skyscrapers and being able to traverse the map at all. So platforms that he can become parallel with, he'll still be able to traverse, but no longer will he be able to magically warp to high ground above him, which does kind of feel weird, especially if you can't see it coming, right? At least if you're on high ground and Doomfist is on a parallel plane with you, you could see it coming and possibly react, whereas before you could do massive sneak attacks that the enemy could never see coming without even using your uppercut to do so. And now you'll have to at least invest the uppercut to get a bit of verticality in order to teleport with seismic slam far distances. Does this change his playstyle, though? I don't think so, honestly. I think everything we say in our Doomfist discussion video still stands, but even more so. It even sharpens his playstyle to be localized to be an enforcer hero more than a dive hero, because now his mobility is just reined in. Before we were worried about it, even with his mobility. We don't even think the mobility nerfs were necessary, to be honest, because he is so easy to hit, even while doing insane mobility, that let him have it. Like, let him have whatever toys he wants, because we feel he can just get shot out of the air so freely that if he wants to zip around and fly forever, have a nice day. Even with that being the case, we think he's pretty much maintained in protecting your team comp and punishing overextension rather than overextending himself. So, without even getting to any of the other changes, this is one key component that's going to be punishing the dive meta without a doubt. But other things have already been added in order to make other heroes more playable in the dive meta as well, and we're going to elaborate on them. Zarya disables characters that are in Graviton Surge, just like a Junkrat Trap does, meaning that any character that used to be able to use mobility to escape Graviton Surge, now is trapped by it. This is massive because here's a problem with Zarya, and why she's sort of a weak pick right now anyway. Zarya does not really do anything against the characters that are good in the mobility meta. Even if she does get high charge, which is what makes her lethal, all the characters can run away from the duel with her, meaning that she sort of gets danced around like Reinhardt does, which is why one of the worst tank combinations you can do right now is pick like Rein, Zarya, and the enemy team pick dive characters, flankers, Pharah, things like that, and you just do nothing against it. The problem is, compare the ability of Peel of D.Va having near infinite defense matrix whenever she wants. When that Tracer comes in to kill your Zenyatta, well, you just pop the defense matrix in effect, regenerate it, she comes back in, do it again, whereas Zarya has an 8-second cooldown for her damage denial, meaning that there's these large windows where she does nothing to protect her team, and if she doesn't get charge in that time, which even if she has it right now, she has trouble finding a duel anyway, she's really weak. So even with the change that they're putting on her, she isn't that great of a choice. However, I will say, if you build your team comp around enabling her, if you're in a more deathball-y brawl comp, especially on points like Anubis second, for instance, where you can very easily set up a team comp that wants to brawl on the point, and then force the enemy, of course, to fight on the point as well. Zarya's ultimate now is really going to shut down all sorts of things that used to be able to escape it, meaning that you can get those guaranteed team wipes that are so crucial. Part of the reason why 2CP stalls out forever still is because nothing really can trap down all the flanker characters that can come in and stall. Tracer just has her way with everything. D.Va comes in. Now a combination of Doomfist, of course, punching anything in the face that tries to come stall. Now you have Zarya that at least that can get a nice clean team wipe to be able to control the point properly, because it isn't just killing the stall as it comes in, it's also being able to get that first team wipe, so Graviton Surge can be used in either scenario, either to quickly dispatch a handful of respawners that are coming in, or to get a more concise team fight wipe from the first go of it, because that element of gameplay, especially on 2CP now, has kind of been lost. Like, you can get it out of maybe a Genji Blade or a really clutch D.Va bomb or Tracer bomb, but we're not really in a meta where there's the big team wipe combinations available to us, because if you try to run those characters, they often kind of get wrecked. Speaking of characters that have been getting wrecked in this meta quite frequently, we're going to move on to Reinhardt and then McCree. Reinhardt's change was much needed. The hammer swing speed isn't the entire story. Also, the hit detection is incredibly important. On the live version of the game, the hit detection feels sluggish, like the damage gets applied after the contact gets made. It's hard to know where you're supposed to be aiming the hammer correctly. And this new update on the PTR feels like a dream again. You could Babe Ruth home run hit your way to victory with Reinhardt once again, and it's not just the swing speed, meaning that you get more damage per second, it's also the swing speed because, of course, the hammer is a large melee weapon. Eddie described the term active frames in his Doomfist fist video, and one cool thing about Reinhardt's hammer, of course, is that the entire swing is an active frame, meaning that no matter where you make contact with that swing, as long as the hammer hits them at any point of the swing, you can make contact with that character, and the damage applying immediately and being more responsive means that he'll feel a bit better while he's getting surrounded and dove upon and etc. But also the accuracy of those swings can be a little bit more precise because the enemy has less time to be able to react while the big swinging arc of the hammer is coming after them. That aspect of actually connecting with the hammer instead of whiffing on it is way more important to me, I think, than the actual overall damage per second, which also applies if he's like smacking around Winston or something. The extra 10% damage is going to matter, but not as much as just merely hitting those hits, because they have been devastating, especially if you're fighting on like Nepal Village on the point. Reinhardt's been sick there, but still kind of hard to play because of the meta. But at the very least, if when he swings his hammer, he can more reliably hit those targets, he can feel a lot more playable, build his ult more reliably, and just be better overall. McCree's effect is easy to miss if you're not paying close attention, because at first I'm like, does this even do anything? I played a ton of McCree on the PTR, barely noticed a difference. The current version of the game, what happens is the stun gets applied, and then the enemy immediately can move as quickly as they normally can right after it's done. Whereas on the PTR, after they recover from the stun, there's this small window of recovery speed where they're kind of ramping up their speed, meaning that they'll be a bit sluggish after the stun, and I would say perhaps even buff this more, I don't know, make it even slower, make it last longer. This is one area that I think would be significant. I don't know if I feel like it's a big deal yet, or if it's enough, but hopefully the combination of all these things put together means that Dive has at least an answer, or at least characters that don't feel so useless against it, and that's kind of the problem. It's very unfun to try to play heroes that seemingly just can't keep up with the enemy's coordination around a type of comp. Of course, there was a change to Reaper as well. The long-awaited sound effects and voiceover, I'm behind you, turn around, voiceover effects that he makes whenever he shadow steps. That definitely helps Sombra quite a bit, allowing for her to have some flanking tactics. However, I will say, I don't think that's where Reaper is strong. It allows that card to be played from him to possibly get in a cheeky flank here or there, but really he's best at brawling on the objective against tanks. There's other characters that are just better at doing flanking to keep a presence in the enemy backline without getting focused immediately. Reaper kind of has the Doomfist effect in that if you go in and dive on them, or anywhere near their back line, you don't really have the tools to be able to freely escape. Despite the fact that this is a good buff, I don't think it's going to significantly change his playstyle, because also, we think Reaper is insane right now. In fact, another section of this conversation is that I think there's a lot of hidden gems in the meta right now that are going vastly underlooked, and it's hard to even keep up with these and make enough content to be able to express our opinions on this all at once, which is nice for us to make these meta discussion wrap-up videos so we can try to get a lot of information out at one time. But there's tons of characters that are really good in the dive meta that aren't the standard dive characters that you can have insane success with. And that's part of a problem with the assumptions of meta, because like Jeff Kaplan said in the big long forum post that we haven't adequately followed up on and probably won't have time to anyway, where he gave a part 2 to his meta misconceptions and his concept of the balance of the game forum post that he made about a week ago now. And one major point that he made in that pairings of post was that metas evolve over time, even if the developers do nothing, which is an important thing to note. I think if we gave the dive meta a little bit more time, some of these characters that I'm going to mention would start to get utilized for where their strengths are, and which is part of the problem. A lot of ire has been placed on Blizzard to say that they don't keep up with the meta of the game and rebalancing things fast enough, but honestly, I think there's a lot of characters that are going vastly underrepresented in their power to deal with the current top meta picks, and compositions that synergize well with these heroes are lacking the respect that they deserve. For instance, Reaper is insane right now because he can instantly pop either of the dive tanks in just a few shots. I mean, this is like a 2-second kill on a tank from a character that doesn't really die while fighting it. Granted, you can get a lot of damage on a Tracer, but Reaper can do it while battling those characters head on. That's what makes him so strong. I already think a character like Reinhardt looks far more playable with a Reaper by his side, because the dive tanks are so annoying to Reinhardt right now. Like, Winston can just jump near him. Ryan has to just hold his shield up and hope his team does something, like, guys, I'm getting electric shocked all the entire time. What do I do? And he's getting flanked, and Tracer's behind him, and it's a big mess. But a character like Reaper, his time to kill on these characters is so punishing and quick that if he's in his back pocket as one of the DPS picks, he can punish the harassment that those tanks want to do, and he also gets quite a bit of reliable damage on characters that are hard to hit otherwise when they're harassing your backline, like Tracer and Genji. And it's kind of similar to how those duels work with Doomfist fighting them as well. In some ways, Doomfist is better, obviously, but Reaper's a solid pick against them also because he has a lot of health, he can keep regenerating it, he's just really sticky on a strong point when you get him into position where he's not diveable. And that's part of the theme of characters that I want to bring up here. Another character that's not really diveable is Torb. I think a lot of players play the game now as if Torb just doesn't exist. And two things about Torb. One, his main weapon is insane for damage. It's hard to hit, of course. The arc of his left click can be quite troublesome, and his right click can feel sporadic, but if you get that into the Winston, it's almost as effective as a Reaper, if not just as effective. And if you have him on your defensive team comp, it really can cause trouble for the enemy dive characters, because the problem is they have to respect the turret, and if they don't respect the turret, those flankers in your backline are just denied access to paths, meaning that you can zone them and fight them head up, which isn't what the dive comp team comp wants to do. It wants to fight you in a big circle surrounding you. Well, if they can't really get on the other end of you because there's a turret in the way slowing them down, as you fight them on the point of contact, Torb looks really sick. Not to mention, of course, the extra armor means that squishy characters that are incredibly diveable now become less diveable. They have another 75 health, might be like a volley of Genji shurikens or something that you survive that you otherwise maybe wouldn't have. Put it on your healer, your soldier, whatever character that the enemy dive comp wants to be focusing, and boom, you're instantly more durable to the dive meta. These two characters aren't even really being changed right now. But keep them in mind as you start to add in these other heroes, Reinhardt and Zarya maybe, that might be deemed more playable as the dive meta comes back. The McCree change, I'm not really sold on it making him less diveable or more effective. The stun slowdown means he can follow up on the stun a bit better. Not really good enough, because if you have the skill to hit the stun and hit the headshot anyway after the stun, which pro players do, they still aren't really able to deal with all of the dive threats. McCree being more valuable is more about like a character like Doomfist, which helps constantly crowd control the enemy to keep McCree alive, helping him find those one-on-one duels that he wants, because McCree's weak to having far too many angles to deal with at one time and getting killed too quick because he's kind of a glass cannon, whereas a character like Doomfist has that consistent crowd control. He has punch and uppercut so frequently that the enemy really can't make that multi-pronged attack on him constantly without Doomfist knocking some characters away and potentially insta-killing them himself. So the McCree change means less to me. It probably helps focus fire tanks even better than flankers, which will buy your team a little bit more time to follow up on that stun. But the problem is against flankers, if you hit that stun, if you don't insta-kill them in the head immediately, they probably have a movement ability to get away from the fire anyway, meaning that the slow effect isn't going to be that great, because if Genji just flashes or Tracer blinks, are you going to be able to follow up on that shot while they're slightly slowed while doing that? Don't really think that matters. You needed the kill when the stun landed. An oppressive stun buff would be a stun duration buff or a stun animation change, making characters either easier to hit once they're stunned or stunned for a longer duration. Could be overpowered too if you try to mess with that, but that's the one change that would make the stun more viable. But the ultimate question after evaluating all of this is, will dive comp die? Part of the problem with this, though, is that dive comp kind of naturally synergizes together if everybody knows generally what their roles are. Winston has to pick good engages, D.Va has to know when to peel and how to manage defense matrix, Genji and Tracer have to be mechanically sound as well as careful enough to not get picked off in fights. And as long as all of those things are being met, there's like this natural synergy that just overwhelms the enemy if they're running a comp that either takes more skill, more coordination, or is just generally less efficient than the dive comp. And to be honest, that might still be the problem even after all of these buffs. We have to find out if Doomfist is too difficult to play in general. I think taking Doomfist as either the secondary DPS or even the flex tank role, taking out a tank and maybe having 3 DPS and propping up a single Reinhardt shield, because the problem is dive comp does not have good shield break. It can't break a shield, but it just flanks it, making the shield irrelevant. But if you have enough punishing tools, mainly the stun of McCree and the punch of Doomfist, can you stop and punish those flanks that try to surround the Rein and get those kills quickly? Because if you do, then with the Rein shield being up, it provides tons of value. I've still been playing Rein here or there on the live server in matchmaking, and I gotta say, when you can get it to work, players forget how powerful having a shield is. It used to be the case, of course, if the enemy team's Rein died and yours didn't, well, you just have infinite health and you can walk towards them and kill them for free and win the fight. That sort of still happens, mind you, if you can stabilize your backline. That's the entire key. You stabilize against the flank and either get the man advantage early that way or force them to funnel into your Rein shield, and they'll just never have enough damage to break through it, and you can easily break through their shielding. The only argument against that playstyle in the live version of the game is that D.Va's defense matrix management can do so much to block so much more efficiently, and she's so easily repositionable, whereas Reinhardt is more static. That makes D.Va more powerful as the big damage denial tank in the meta. But if we have a character like Doomfist that can punish her quite severely and get that defense matrix out of play, that kind of opens up everything, doesn't it? On top of the fact that Zarya is more pickable as well, seeing that Graviton Surge is a lot better against that comp. And it's already well known that Zarya and Doomfist have basic synergies because her bubble covers his biggest weakness, which is vulnerability, as he doesn't have escape or reflect or blink or anything like that. All signs point towards Deathball being a playable option, but the problem is that I have to warn you guys before this happens is that the way metas work is that these two ideas will come at a head and clash, and teams will try to run Deathball, try to prop up the Doomfist, and eventually an answer will be made that one is either easier to do in different scenarios, but it's very unlikely, actually, that multiple comps will be just as good at the same time. Right now, a lot of pro teams run things like Orisa Torb on first points to try to just stay alive for as long as possible because other team comps fight and brawl and die quickly, And with bad respawns, there's no point anyway. You're just going to give up the point for free. So they at least attempt Orisa Torb, which isn't very good, but at least takes a while to chew through just to burn some time off the clock. And besides that, it's like dive all the way, Sombra mixed in here or there, Reaper mixed in recently as well. But beyond that, the Winston Diva combo is the bread and butter that stabilizes the entire meta. They have too much synergy and can prop up the weaknesses of the other flanky characters that, when they can survive, just are the best. They're the fastest, most ferocious, most directly confrontational characters in the game, so if they can't easily be countered, they're going to be the best picks. Ideally, you'd like to be able to pick the comp that works best for you and your team, but that's not really the way balance works. A quote that Jeff Kaplan brought up in his forum post is that even if they make the game so balanced that a strategy or a character is just 1% better, pro players will say the character that's just 1% worse is unplayable. And that's kind of true, really. That's what it's going to come down to. Is it easier to dive or to counter dive? Once that's been hashed out, the conclusion will be made, and likely there'll be a king comp once again. However, there's another idea that as more characters become viable at the same time, you could have tier listings of comps. That is the promised land. Not that all comps can be equally competitive, but at the very least, multiple comps can exist, if not perfectly in unison, but at least in competition and in a somewhat viable department. Is that a thing in Overwatch? In a game like Hearthstone, where in the esports scene, you only play like one deck at a time, and you're going to have to lose the deck that you're using. So whatever strategy you went with one deck, if it doesn't work out, you can go for a counter strategy with an entirely separate deck. Overwatch team comps are kind of like Hearthstone decks in that they have themes to how they work, but the problem is in a shooter game, because we're dealing with FPS skill, and there's no limiting factor on team comps, there's no pick ban, there's no reason to force anyone to change team comps. Not saying that there should be necessarily. I kind of do wish there was, but that's an argument for another day. There's no limitations on team comps at all, meaning that you always will just pick whatever is 1% better. Why wouldn't you? The only thing that can change is either the game mode or the geometry of the positioning that you're fighting in. If you're in close range or long range, that might change the comp that's good, but that's about it. Forever, we're going to be dealing with this problem with Overwatch, which is kind of why I would say that more game modes, maybe elimination, even though I think 3v3 works better than 6v6, or a hero draft to some degree, at least for pro play, might be in order so that this constant dog chasing his tail balancing issue, where we try to change something so it's more valuable, and then all of a sudden the meta shifts again because old decisions you made now are revealed to be too good in comparison to the stuff you just nerfed. It's always going to go down a big circle like this. There's always going to be a top tier comp. The problem is there isn't much use or need to have to play the second best comp because there's no limiting factors on having to play them. That might be bad news for those of you who are so sick of stale meta in terms of one comp always being the top comp. So really, it's not a problem that I foresee us overcoming and either something we have to deal with and just realize is going to be the case until the end of time, or we take other measures to try to limit the options of what you can play, or game modes that drastically change how you play Overwatch so that multiple comps might be seen at the same time in a given season in different modes. Guys, let me know your opinions on the shifting metagame as it's coming up. These changes are incredible. Really exciting because even if they don't make a massive resurgence in the meta, they're just a lot more playable and fun to play and feel less punishing and give you an opportunity at least to play them, whereas now, oftentimes, it feels like they aren't playable, especially Reinhardt, McCree, and Zarya, because of all the enemy threats that can just style on them and do whatever they want to those characters. They feel like their plays that they make aren't significant enough to keep up with all the chaos that's going on in the mobility meta. The big Doomfist patch can't come soon enough. Put him in the live game already. I think he's ready, okay? You've had enough toying around. Got all these other crazy buffs. I want my new crosshairs and my new Reinhardt. Let's get it into the game. If you guys agree, please leave a like on this video, especially if you did enjoy it. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe because we do upload each and every day. So you're gonna wanna hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Linked in the description, you can check out our Discord server and our Twitter page where we tweet out news, updates, and cool clips. That's been it for me. I've been FREEDO for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.